Hello again, and welcome back to Year 4 of the Religious Education Initiative. This is week 38 and day 1. So we're returning now to the story of King David. We left him having gained the kingship over all Israel, living in Jerusalem, and planning to build a house for the Lord. But God told him no, that he was not to build a temple, but promised instead that David's seed would build a temple and a kingdom that would last forever. In this confidence, we will then see David proceed to make war against all the enemies of Israel, with great success against them all. And then we will see what comes next for David when he has succeeded in everything he has set his hand to do. We will only summarize most of the detail of chapters 8 through 10 before we read chapter 11, and what's summarized will be shown in italics. So, chapter 8. Sometime afterward, David attacked the Philistines and subdued them. David took Metheg-Ammah out of the hand of the Philistines. He also defeated the Moabites, and making them lie down on the ground, measured them off with a cord. He measured 2 lengths of cord for those who were to be put to death, and 1 length for those who were to be spared. And the Moabites became servants to David, and brought tribute. He also fought against many others, against the Edomites and the Amalekites, and any others that came against him. David won a name for himself. When he returned, he killed 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. He put garrisons in Edom. Throughout all Edom he put garrisons, and all the Edomites became David's servants. And the Lord gave victory to David wherever he went. So David reigned over all Israel, and David administered justice and equity to all his people. Joab, son of Zeruiah, was over the army. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was recorder. Zadok, son of Ahitub, and Ahimelech, son of Abiathar, were priests. Seraiah was secretary. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was over the Cherethites and the Pelethites. And David's sons were priests. In chapter 9, we see David seek out the son of Jonathan, Mephibosheth, and he gives him all the possessions that had belonged to Saul, and makes him a favored friend of the king. In this he fulfills his promise to Jonathan to bless him and to protect his offspring. In chapter 10, we see David find himself at war with the Ammonites. It's a process. He begins by sending an embassy of peace to the new Ammonite king, but that new king instead cut off half the clothing and half the beard of each emissary to shame them and to shame David, and then sends them home. This becomes a cause of war and brings us to the beginning of chapter 11. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab with his officers and all Israel with him. They ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained at Jerusalem. It happened late one afternoon, when David rose from his couch and was walking about on the roof of the king's house, that he saw from the roof a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. David sent someone to inquire about the woman. It was reported, "This is Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite." So David sent messengers to get her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now she was purifying herself after her period. Then she returned to her house. The woman conceived, and she sent and told David, "I am pregnant." So David sent word to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." And Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab and the people fared and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the entrance of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and did not go down to his house. When they told David, Uriah did not go down to his house, David said to Uriah, "You have just come from a journey. Why did you not go down to your house?" Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Judah remain in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do such a thing." Then David said to Uriah, "Remain here today also, and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day. On the next day, David invited him to eat and drink in his presence, and made him drunk. And in the evening he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of his lord, but he did not go down to his house. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab, and sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, "Set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him, so that he may be struck down and die." As Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant warriors. The men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the servants of David among the people fell. Uriah the Hittite was killed as well. Then Joab sent and told David all the news about the fighting, and he instructed the messenger, "When you have finished telling the king all the news about the fighting, then, if the king's anger rises, and if he says to you, 'Why did you go so near the city to fight? Did you not know that they would shoot from the wall? Who killed Abimelech son of Jerubbaal? Did not a woman throw an upper millstone on him from the wall, so that he died at Thebez? Why did you go so near the wall?' Then you shall say, 'Your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead too.'" So the messenger went, and came and told David all that Joab had sent him to tell. The messenger said to David, "The men gained an advantage over us, and came out against us in the field, but we drove them back to the entrance of the gate. Then the archers shot at your servants from the wall. Some of the king's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also." David said to the messenger, "Thus you shall say to Joab, 'Do not let this matter trouble you, for the sword devours now one and now another. Press your attack on the city, and overthrow it, and encourage him.'" When the wife of Uriah heard that her husband was dead, she made lamentation for him. When the mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. Okay. So now that we get here, I think we see that this is the story toward which the writer of the story of David has been building from the very beginning. We've seen these strange hints, these strange inclusions of something violent that David did. We've seen this repeated mention, and this is where David took another wife, and where he took another wife, and this is where he had 6 wives and had a son from each of them. And this is all of these things that have been happening. We see David doing more and more violence, even in the chapters that we summed up today. How when he conquers the Moabites, he doesn't decimate them. He doesn't just kill 1 in 10. He kills 1 in 3 of the prisoners. This is not how we see God commanding Israel to make war. We see David becoming not just a violent man of war, but also a man who is faithful. We see him becoming overwhelmed with violence, and on the same token we see him giving himself over entirely to the pleasures of the body that are available to a king of men. So that by the time we get to this point, David doesn't even go out to war. He stays home. He sends the army. And where before, when he comes into the house of God and asks for bread from the tabernacle, and the priest says, "I can give it to you so long as you have kept yourself from women." And David says, "We've always done that. That at least of the law we always follow. The men are always kept from women before we go out to war. We're always pious and faithful." Now David has sent out the army, but he stays home, taking his pleasure anywhere he can find it. And the woman that he seizes is the wife of one of his soldiers. And as we hear later, not just one of his soldiers, a common soldier of the army. Uriah the Hittite is a man that has been with David from the beginning. He's been with David in the wilderness. He's one of David's mighty men. He's renowned. He's been faithful to David. And more than that, he's a foreigner. He's a Hittite who has come into the Commonwealth of Israel, who's become part of the covenant. This is everything working right. That Uriah is there with David is David being a good king, because the nations are coming in and being ruled by the anointed of Yahweh, by the Messiah of Yahweh. The nations are coming into the Lord's inheritance. And then David takes this faithful man and he corrupts his marriage bed. He takes his wife, and when she sends back that she's pregnant, he tries to bring Uriah back to sleep with her himself so that Uriah will assume the child is his, so David's sin will be covered. But Uriah is more faithful than David. Uriah is refusing to be intimate with his wife until the war is over because he's a soldier. He's a messenger. He's not done with the war. He's just back on duty, so he's eager to get back and finish the battle. So David gives an order for him to be murdered, and he makes him the messenger to carry his own death sentence. And David somehow doesn't seem to have any remorse. He feels, oh good, it's covered up, it's done, it's fine, wonderful. And as soon as the time of mourning is finished, which can't be long, weeks, months, David marries Uriah's widow, and she bears the son to him. And then we finally get a clear piece of commentary. This thing that David has done displeased the Lord. This is David having fallen so far from where he began. It's worse than anything Saul did, because Saul was never as good as David. But there's a lot to be troubled with here. So, I will say it's worth noting, where does David make his mistake? And there are two answers to this. The first answer is he's been on this long road of degradation of his moral character. He's become accustomed to violence, and he's given himself over to the love of women. He's not being faithful to one wife, which is what the law requires, right? But the other mistake he does, he's lazy. Or not lazy, but he doesn't do his duty. The kings go out to war in the spring. That's what his responsibility is supposed to be. David sends his army and his general. He decides he's going to take it easy. And as he is taking his ease, this is where he falls into sin. And if we're looking for a lesson, that can be a good lesson for us to draw. So anyway, God bless you. We'll see you all next week. Well, rather, we'll see you shortly for day 2, but we'll finish this story next week. So God bless you.